The hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic, a sterile scent that usually comforted Mark. But today, it made his stomach twist with unease. He had decided to return early from work, a sudden change in plans he couldn't explain to anyone. His mother, Helen, had been admitted 2 days ago for minor heart complications, and the nurses had reassured him that she was stable. Yet, a sense of foreboding gripped him as he hurried through the familiar halls. Something told him this visit would not be ordinary. As he approached his mother's room, he noticed subtle disturbances. A few personal items were moved out of place, the bedside table slightly askew. More unsettling was the way his wife, Rachel, hovered over Helen, insisting she take her medications in a manner Mark didn't recognize. Helen looked uneasy, her eyes darting between Rachel and Mark's arrival, relief washing over her face. The scene struck Mark like a bolt. There was an intensity in Rachel's demeanor that didn't fit concern. It was controlling, overbearing, almost dangerous. "Mom, are you okay?" Mark asked softly, stepping into the room. Helen's hand clutched his arm, her frailty evident as she leaned into his support. Rachel smiled, but it was forced, almost mechanical, and she turned to face Mark with a cool nod. "I was just helping your mother with her vitamins," she said. But Mark's intuition screamed that something was wrong. The timing, her insistence, the subtle pressure she had applied, none of it seemed coincidental. Something was off, and he had to uncover it before it was too late. Mark observed Rachel quietly, noticing the tiny details that revealed her intent. She had switched Helen's pills around, giving her one that was harmless and holding the others back. The dosage seemed uneven, inconsistent with the doctor's instructions. Helen tried to speak, her voice frail but insistent, as if to warn him. "Mark, she's giving me something I shouldn't," Helen whispered. Panic rose in Mark's chest. How had he not noticed this sooner? His mind raced, recalling past instances where Rachel had insisted on controlling small aspects of Helen's care, and the pattern became frighteningly clear. He moved closer to Helen and gently guided her away from Rachel. "Mom, don't take anything from her. Let me handle it," he said firmly. Rachel's smile faltered for the first time, a shadow of irritation flashing across her face. "I'm only trying to help," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. Mark's hands shook slightly, not from fear of confrontation, but from the realization of what might have happened if he hadn't come early. His mother's life could have been in jeopardy, and the betrayal cut deeply. Rachel, the woman he trusted, was the threat. Mark called the nurse immediately, explaining the situation in a low, urgent voice. Within minutes, a staff member arrived, checking Helen's medications and confirming Mark's fears. The pills Rachel had substituted were dangerous in combination with Helen's heart medications. "You did the right thing by coming back," the nurse said gently, moving Rachel out of the room while ensuring Helen was safe. Relief mixed with lingering anger surged through Mark. He had narrowly prevented a disaster. He watched his mother's fragile frame relax as the tension in the room dissipated, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear simultaneously. Rachel's motives became clearer in the following days. It wasn't hatred, not exactly, it was control. She wanted Mark's attention, to prove that she could manage everything in his life, even his family. But the method she chose was terrifyingly reckless. Mark confronted her with the evidence, showing her the pills, the instructions, and the nurse's report. Her initial defensiveness crumbled under the weight of reality. "I didn't mean, she stammered, but Mark saw no excuse for endangering someone so vulnerable. The bond of trust had shattered in an instant, and he knew nothing would restore it fully. Mark focused on healing the breach between him and his mother. He spent more time at the hospital, sitting with her, ensuring she took her medications properly, and monitoring her recovery closely. Helen, though shaken, expressed a quiet strength that inspired Mark. She refused to let fear dominate her, insisting on small walks in the hospital corridor and enjoying brief moments of conversation. Mark realized the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just Rachel's actions that were dangerous, but the potential for harm when family dynamics were manipulated by someone trusted. Vigilance became his new routine. Rachel's attempts to explain herself failed to convince either Mark or the medical staff. Psychologists were consulted to understand her behavior, and she was strongly advised to undergo counseling. Mark wrestled with his feelings. Love, anger, fear, and disappointment all collided. The woman he had married, whom he once considered his partner, had crossed a boundary that could never be ignored. It was a painful lesson in human behavior, trust, and the fine line between care and control. Mark understood he had to make a choice, not just for Helen's safety, but for the emotional well-being of his entire family. Helen's condition gradually improved under careful supervision, and Mark's vigilance paid off. He reorganized her medication schedule himself, learning the intricacies of her treatment and ensuring no external interference could occur again. Rachel's presence became restricted, monitored closely by staff. The hospital, once a place of quiet healing, had transformed into a theater of tension and awareness, teaching Mark the value of observation, quick action, and unwavering commitment to family safety. He never underestimated the subtle signs of danger again, understanding that love alone was not always enough protection. As Helen prepared for discharge, Mark felt a cautious optimism. He had reclaimed control over her safety, but the emotional scars remained. Rachel's actions had left a deep impression on him, forcing him to reevaluate boundaries and trust within marriage and family. Helen, ever resilient, offered wisdom that cut through his frustration. "Sometimes danger comes from those we love most," she said softly, "but your vigilance kept me safe." Mark realized that her words were both a warning and a tribute to his actions, a reminder that awareness and courage could prevent disaster. The aftermath of the hospital incident led Mark and Rachel into an uncertain space. They engaged in therapy, discussing her compulsions and need for control, but trust was fragile. Helen, meanwhile, remained his anchor, her presence a stabilizing force in the chaos. Mark continued to manage her health meticulously, aware that one lapse could be catastrophic. The experience had reshaped his priorities, forcing him to balance love, responsibility, and caution. Every day became an exercise in vigilance, and every decision carried weight far beyond the ordinary, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and trust. Mark reflected often on the day he returned early to the hospital. It was a choice made on a whim, yet it altered the course of events dramatically. The near-tragic incident revealed character, intentions, and the hidden dangers within familiar faces. Helen's gratitude was a daily reminder of the stakes involved, and Mark understood that protection sometimes required confrontation. The experience strengthened his resolve to safeguard those he loved, regardless of personal discomfort or conflict. Rachel's influence had been a threat, but Mark's proactive choice turned potential disaster into a lesson in vigilance and care. Months later, Helen's health stabilized completely, and the family adjusted to a new normal. Rachel's presence became conditional, therapeutic, and carefully monitored. Mark maintained strict oversight of medications and daily routines, understanding that responsibility sometimes meant uncomfortable vigilance. He had learned that trust could be fragile, that danger was often subtle, and that decisive action could prevent irreversible harm. The hospital episode became a defining moment in his life, shaping the way he approached relationships, family care, and the responsibility of safeguarding those most vulnerable. It was a lesson written in real-life urgency. Mark often revisited the hospital room in his memory, recalling the tension, the fear, and the decisive moments that preserved life. Helen's quiet resilience, his rapid response, and the exposure of Rachel's dangerous behavior intertwined to create a narrative of vigilance, courage, and the consequences of misplaced trust. The incident became more than a memory, it became a framework for decision-making, a reminder that careful observation, empathy, and proactive intervention were vital in protecting those who could not fully protect themselves. Mark's life, his family's safety, and Helen's recovery depended on the lessons learned that day.